Hi friends, E.C. Maltbia here, Senior Pastor of the True Holiness Saints Center in the beautiful city of Conway, Arkansas. And you know what time it is. It is Wednesday Word time. So what is our Wednesday Word for tonight? Our Wednesday Word is exit. More specifically, I want to talk to you tonight about exit strategies when you're thinking about resigning a position. These strategies tonight will work if you're thinking about resigning a job, if you're thinking about resigning from an organization, if you're thinking about leaving a church. But if you're thinking about exiting from a place, a person, or a position, I want you to consider these exit strategies. Now, before we go into the strategies tonight, let me give you our social media quote. What is the social media quote, Pastor Maltbia? It's simply a thought or thesis that we encourage you to put out on all of your social media platforms for information and for inspiration. So here it is tonight, and this will be a thesis that will guide our discussion throughout this message. Here's our social media quote. The way you leave will either maintain your reputation or damage it. The way you leave, the way you exit, the way you resign will either maintain your reputation or it will severely damage it. So tonight, what I thought I would do is give you 3 exit strategies that will help to maintain or protect your Christian integrity and your reputation. So the first strategy I want to give you is simply this. When you're thinking about resigning, when you're thinking about walking away, when you're thinking about leaving a place, a position, always make sure it's God-led. Always make sure that God has told you that this is the next step you need to make. In fact, write this down somewhere. Never make an emotional decision, particularly when you're talking about resigning or walking away. Here's what I know for sure. It is dangerous when you make a decision to resign in a moment of anger. It is dangerous for you to make a decision to resign when you're frustrated. What I know for sure is it is dangerous to make a decision rather not to walk away when you are overly tired or experiencing burnout. Whenever your emotions are on edge, pause and pray and make sure that the decision is God-led. In a moment of frustration, that's not the time to decide that you're ready to walk away. So what I'm really saying to you is this. The question is not, are you frustrated? The question is not, are you burned out? The question is not, are you hurt or angry? The number one question you need to ask is, have I prayed about it? Have I sat down calmly and talked to God about my next move? I like the way James says it. In James chapter 1 and verse 5, he says these words. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God. In other words, if you don't know whether to go right or left, whether to resign or to stay, if you lack wisdom in a specific area, you need to pray about it. You need to ask God, who gives generously to all without fault finding, and he will be given, and it will be given to you. So in other words, the Bible says, if you're not sure what to do, pray about it. Ask God, what's my next move? More specifically, you need to ask God, is it time for me to resign, or is it time for me to have a difficult conversation? A lot of us are walking away from places and positions and people when it really wasn't time to resign, but it was time to have a hard, awkward conversation with someone and tell them how you feel. Tell them how you got hurt. Tell them that you feel overworked. Tell them that you feel underappreciated. Before you walk away, ask God, Do I need to have a difficult, awkward conversation? Don't just assume they should know how you feel. Pray about that thing. Sometimes you need to not walk away, but simply redefine your role within the relationship, within the organization, within the church, on your job. Sometimes it's not time for you to walk away. It's time to reestablish boundaries and expectations. Sometimes you just have to tell the organization, I'm going to do this, but I'm not going to do that. Sometimes you have to make it clear, I can spend 2 hours volunteering a week, but I'm not going to continue to spend 8 or 9 hours volunteering. Sometimes it's not about walking away. It's about having difficult, awkward conversations to redefine your role. Sometimes you need to pray and ask God, before you walk away and before you resign, Lord, show me myself in this situation. Show me how I contributed to this problem. Show me how I contributed to this conflict. Show me how I contributed to this frustration. Because whether it is 2% or 100%, whatever your part is, own it. Sometimes the reason you're being overworked is because you always say yes and never set boundaries. God, show me how I contributed to being burned out. Show me how I contributed to being disappointed. Did I have unrealistic expectations? Did I ever tell people how I really feel? But before you simply walk away, before you simply resign, stop and pray and ask God, should I have a difficult conversation? Should I set better boundaries? But don't walk away if God has not released you. So when it comes time to decide whether or not you need to resign or walk away, the first thing you need to do to protect your reputation and to honor God is to make sure God has released you. But then secondly tonight, once you know that God has released you, once you've prayed about it, once you're calm and God says, yes, it's time to move on, then secondly, don't drag it out. Yeah, don't drag it out. In other words, from the moment you get confirmation that it's time for you to move on, rip the Band-Aid off. In other words, quit procrastinating. What you need to do is immediately have that conversation with those that are going to be impacted. Here's what so many Christians do that cause our reputations to be damaged. When we know it's time for us to move on, or when we feel like it's time for us to resign, instead of going to the pastor, instead of going to the organizational leader, instead of going to the person that you're redefining a relationship or stepping away from, we typically just ghost people. Because we're not good with conflict resolution, we just simply disappear without any explanation. But what I'm saying to you is, from the moment you know God has told you it's time to resign, it's time to move on, you need to pick up the phone, set up a time to have that awkward conversation that it's time for me to move on. To have an exit interview, if you would, and share with them your thoughts and what your next move is. Now, why do we do this as Christians? Because number one, it gives the organization time to process you not being there. Gives them time to find your replacement. So if you know it's time for you to leave your job, don't just walk away that day, but give them that 2-week notice so they can find a proper replacement. It is so important not to drag the process out. I love what the psalmist says in Psalms 119 and 60. It says, I will hasten and not delay to obey your commands. And when God tells you to move on, you ought to hasten. You ought to move quickly to leave in the right way. Our Wednesday word tonight is exit strategies. And if you want to leave an organization, a position, or a person in a way that maintains your reputation and doesn't damage your reputation, number one, you've got to make sure that that decision to leave has been endorsed by God. You got to pray about it. And once you get past your feelings and you have peace about it, secondly, yes, you don't drag the process out, but you tell them as soon as possible and give them enough time to find a replacement. And here's the last one, and I'm going to get out of here. Don't make a spectacle. Yeah. If it is your time to leave, you've prayed about it, you've got confirmation, you've had those difficult conversations, don't make a spectacle out of your exit. Let me say it a different way. Don't burn bridges on your way out. Yeah, you might ought to write that down. Never burn unnecessary bridges on your way out. Why do you say that, Pastor Maltbia? I'm leaving this place. I don't even want to think about them again. You shouldn't intentionally burn bridges, number one, because you don't know when you might need a reference. You don't know when you might need somebody to speak well of you. Here's what I know for sure. The grass is not always greener on the other side. People can promise you the world, and you get over there and realize it's not what you thought it would be. And you always want to have the opportunity to go home. You always want to have the opportunity to return. You can resign a position. You can resign a job. You can move from one church to another without falling out with the people you left. Every time you burn a bridge, ma'ams and sirs, it shrinks your networking capacity. It cuts off valuable connections that you may need in the future. Do not step on the people while you're going up, because you might have to face them if you ever have to come back down. You don't know, down the road, there might be an unexpected collaboration that God wants you to be involved in with somebody from your past. So it's important that you left that relationship in the right way. Proverbs 22:1 says, a good name is more desirable than great riches. To be esteemed is better than silver and gold. Always remember, you don't want to ruin your reputation on your way out the door. So what does that mean? And it can mean a lot of things. But here's a couple I'll say to you. Number one, if you decide to leave, don't make a spectacle on social media, particularly when it comes to a job. Don't get on social media talking about all the things you didn't like about your last job, because you've got to understand the number one back check or background check that companies are using now is your social media. And if you talked about this company, that next employer will say, well, if they did that to them, they'll do it to us, so we'll choose somebody else. Nobody wants to hire, nobody wants to invite to the team somebody that puts all their private information on social media. So if you're going to leave a church, if you're going to leave an organization, if you're going to leave a job, do it quietly. You don't have to put your business on social media, because it might hurt you in the future. But then secondly, do not, ma'ams and sirs, try to recruit other people to be disgruntled on your way out. I see this in corporate America. I see this in local churches. I see this within organizations. I see this within relationships. Once somebody becomes disgruntled and decides it's time for me to move on, the first thing they do is try to rally other people to be disgruntled too. And that's not the way God operates. If God is leading you to move on, then you ought to leave that organization, you ought to leave that job, you ought to leave that church better than when you found it. but you certainly don't want to try to burn the place down on your way out. So don't sow any negative seeds. Don't try to get somebody to join you in exiting, but let God deal with every individual as he deals with you. Don't burn bridges on your way out. Our Wednesday word tonight is exit. More specifically, we're talking about exit strategies that protect your reputation and honor your God. Until we speak again, my friends, be blessed.